Is it a symptom of trauma or unresolved healing that causes this disorder? And if we heal the trauma, will we be able to eliminate these symptoms or these disorders?
I think we'll be able to get rid of a lot of stuff, a lot of it. Some of it, as I mentioned, because there is that genetic loading, and we got to think of the genetics that we talked about already, right? Like, we're talking about lineages of genetic loadings. So, if we start doing the work now, maybe we'll see a lot less of these disorders happening within our families and our communities. So there is a lot that we can do to actually rectify the abundance of mental illness that's out there, right? Yeah. I believe that there is a lot of the mental illness that exists in the world that has an undercurrent of trauma, and we just haven't talked about that undercurrent or that possibility as much. But I don't know if we'll be able to absolve ourselves of 100% of the mental illness in the world, but I think that we can do a really good job in this generation to break cycles.
Could an individual eliminate these mental health issues on an individual level if they are willing to do the deep healing work? Because essentially, because I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, these are like symptoms of trauma. You didn't grow up depressed. Certain things happened, an event happened, an environment continued to foster the feelings of depression, the state of depression. And if we can heal the memory, the trauma, the event, and reconnect to our purest self, our whole human self, wouldn't those things start to go away?
That's precisely the goal. So, where we started off with psychology and psychiatry is we started off with symptom management. A lot of psychiatry, we're still kind of there a little bit.
Which is like, here's the drug to manage the symptoms.
Band-Aid.
But that's not healing.
Yeah.
That's not resolving, that's just managing it.
Precisely.
But that doesn't do anything to bring back to wholeness.
Yes, and integrate the person.
Integrating the healing, right?
Exactly, and that's the goal. That's the goal for me, that's the goal in my practice. I want full integration of that person. I want them to really see their authentic self. Some people have never even had an opportunity to see like who they could be at their true core self, because it's been masked by so much of the trauma and the symptomatology that's associated with the trauma, like the depression, anxiety, and all those things.
Yeah. So you believe that people can heal these mental health challenges as well if they integrate fully?
Many of them, especially the ones that, because I think we have like bipolar disorder and we have, schizophrenia that have a different mechanism to them, but many of them absolutely.
But many of the ones that a lot of people are facing, depression,
the big ones.
ADD, ADHD,
depression especially, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How important is finding a meaningful purpose in life support you in overcoming feeling depressed or depression?
It's like so critical. It's 100%. I mean, like when we're talking about what happens after trauma, meaning making is at the center. It's like one of the biggest things because you have to see your life having some sort of value and that there's meaning associated with your life and with everything that's within your life in order to actually like even feel motivated to do the heavy lifting that is the healing work to get yourself to the other side. So you have to have meaning in that journey. Meaning making, it's alchemized in that journey, it's created in that journey, right? But I think at the very least, you have to have hope that meaning making can be possible.
Because what it sounds like to me is a lot of people attach meaning in a more negative, harmful state to events, to words, to actions that happen around them. And therefore that meaning causes more depression, ADHD, or negative thoughts, all these different things that hurt us.
Yeah.
But if we created a different meaning around the event or the words or the event, the breakup or the loss of career, created a new meaning around it and had a different intention, a different purpose moving forward, we wouldn't have those mental challenges as much.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, just haven't been trained to ask themselves the right questions around meaning making, right? And so...
What's the right questions?
Well, the right questions are,
Someone experiences a traumatic event, or big T or little t. What questions should we ask?
Yeah, we should be asking, So questions around, well, let's talk about what was learned in that circumstance. That's a really hard question to ask because sometimes people will be like, you think that needed to happen? No, it didn't need to happen.
It did happen.
It happened.
Can't change it.
You can't. That's in your history now.
Yeah.
But what can we take from that experience? And it doesn't even need to be the traumatic event itself, but your response, your reaction. What can we take from that to learn how to now create a healing protocol for you? And it's about, being able to ask questions that get people thinking outside of the box, because what happens when you're in a state of trauma is that you're frozen in many ways. Your thoughts are frozen. You start thinking a lot of the same things, right? Like it's a lot of protective functions. Your feelings are frozen in time. Like people constantly feel worry, anxiety, like a lot of things that are, just them being in a protective state. And so if we can start asking questions to free some of that up, that's going to be really key. But I like that question, even though, I think it can veer us in different directions, but I'm open to that whenever it comes to work with a client, right? Because wherever we go, I'm with them. I'm going with you, and we're following that path.
If someone stays committed to their story of meaning, that it was this horrible event and it ruined my life, the divorce, the job loss, the injury, whatever it might be, what happens if they hold on to the meaning in a negative way as opposed to, that was a traumatic event, I don't wish it upon anyone, but here's what I learned from it, here's what I gained from it, here's what I'm going to do with it in a positive way. What happens to those?
Well, the way that I interpret that is that person is, one, still in a state of fear. They're not ready to really get curious about what other definitions meaning can have in their life. They're just really stuck on the one definition, that it tarnished their lives, that it got in the way, and they're just stuck there, right? And so if that's the case, then my role as a clinician, or their role as a person that wants to get out of it, hopefully, is to work on the fear. You got to work on, where is fear trapped? How is the nervous system operating around fear, right? Like, where can we free them up in a bodily sense? Because the nervous system requires a lot lot body-based work. And so we have to really get curious about that and go in that direction versus, the questions are very mind-focused, right? But we need the body-based practices in order to create safety in the body.
To release also, right? To release the fear, the pain, the trauma, and reconnect to the safety of your body. Is that right?
Exactly. And so that when a person can feel that there is safety in their body, they can feel that they can actually go into the depths of their minds in a way that doesn't feel scary and existential.
Right. Speaking of fear, I saw somewhere recently, I don't know if this is true, but I saw somewhere recently that human beings are born with 3 fears. The fear of loud noises, the fear of falling, and the fear of abandonment. I don't know if that's true, but if it is, we tend to add more fears as time go on. I don't know if that's true, if those are the only 3 or we don't have fears at all, but it seems like we collect more fears through childhood and adulthood. Why do you think we gather so many fears and collect them?
Well, I think you're talking about primary fears, right? Those feel like primary fears to me. They're what you start off with. As a baby, you're gonna have that startle response. As a baby, you're gonna need to feel deeply connected and attuned to a caregiver.
Otherwise you don't live,
Basically, right? And so it's basically a fear of losing life or a fear of losing safety. So it makes a lot of sense, but the accumulation of it also makes sense because we operate in mental representations, in categories, basically. So we have specific categories in our minds that are primarily created in our childhood, and then everything else that happens in life, we put in the different categories in the buckets of our minds, and they just start accumulating and growing. So if you have a big fear bucket, then you're gonna have a lot of fears that are gonna, come into your life and stay there because your fear bucket is just, so enormous. There's so many of us that are walking around this world not having challenged a lot of those initial ideas that we've created around ourselves, regardless of where they came from. They could have been from a parent who told you, you disappoint me, you're not good enough, right? And that manifested into a mental representation of themselves as not being good enough.